Hey up guys, Ricky here with a quick message. If you didn't know, I have written a book. There's links for how to get to that in the video description below, and I'll put a little card up here so that you can click on that if you want to support my work here on the channel. Back to the lesson. Hey up guys, in this lesson I'm going to show you something that all beginners on all instruments should know, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to tailor this for guitar. One of the things that you definitely need to know is the major scale. Now the thing is, the major scale, it's a major deal, guys, because this scale is the most important scale. What we've got to think about is the guitar itself, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a string. This is any and every string that you are ever going to come across on guitar. These are fret wires. If I put a note on here and I put a note on here, this is the shortest distance that we can move from one fret to another fret. And this symbol, this angled bracket shape, this is going to be a half step. But let me just introduce you to this idea of things having multiple names, i.e. these are synonyms. So if we think about a half step, what we can also think in UK money is we can think of that as being called a semitone. And now this is going to make sense when I do the next version of this. If I put this note here, I'm going to use this shape here. This is a square bracket to denote that this is a whole step. So if I put this here, this is one step. This is known as a tone. That would make sense. If this is the whole distance between this note and this note, you can see if we cut it in half, then we get a semitone. That makes sense when it comes down to it being called a half step or a step. There is the intervallic way of naming this as well. This is what I mean about synonym thinking, because these are all the same things. So this distance between here and here, had to rub that out because I put it in the wrong spot. This is the major second. Now, here's the way to think about it. Major is big. Minor is less. This half step or semitone, as an interval, we would call it a minor second. So these guys here, that note to that note, you could call it a half step, you could call it a semitone, you could call it a minor second. These guys become super important when we talk about key. The main keys that we work in are major and minor keys. We have to understand the major key because it's a big deal. It's the foundation of all diatonic harmony. We're going to start with C major. Why do I always use C major? The C major is the white keys on the piano. There are no sharps or flats. I'm actually going to show you how those sharps and flats come about as well, and how we generate the cycle of fifths and the cycle of fourths. Let's take the C major scale. So go C, D, E, F, G. We've reached the end of our musical alphabet, so we have to go all the way back to A again, A, B, and then we go back to C. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 specific sounds, 7 different notes. And this here is basically a repeat of the first note. Now, the way I see these notes is that this here and this here, these are bookends. This is the case with any scale, that what happens is you get a root note and then you get another root note at the end. When we go from a root note to a root note, that distance is called an octave, because we've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Octopus, octagon. What we can do is we can either put an R there, or we can put 1, because that is the first note. It would make sense that this note here is the second note. And guess what? This is the third note, fourth note, fifth note, sixth note, seventh note, and then we get the octave. So I can put an 8, generally with a VE, or I could even just put 1, or I could put root again. Synonym way of thinking. Just like we had for half step, semitone and minor second, we have different names for the same thing. It's all about the context. If we're thinking about the distance of that note from that note, we would call it an octave. If we're looking at that's a C, we would maybe think that it's the first note or the root note. It's the same thing. So it's a different way of thinking about it. The thing with the major scale is it has the same structure. I'm going to do it a few different ways, and you're going to come across it like this as well. This actually introduces another way that we can actually look at half step and step, and that is people sometimes use H for half step, and they use W for whole step, so half whole. So that's a whole step, that's a half step. What we do is we take that information and we add that to this C major scale here, guys. Let me show you the structure using these brackets here. If we don't keep that structure, it will not sound like the major scale, and all the chords that come from harmonizing it as a result will sound different and wrong. So you can see I've taken these brackets here and I've applied them now to my linear scale. There's no need to write this out in standard notation because I think this is just a better representation. Everybody can understand this without the need to read music. So I could call that a whole, which would be a whole step. And notice I'm just using this idea. So that's one step, that's one step, that's a half, that's a step, that's a step, that's a step, that's a half step. That would make sense because if you think about it, E and F, they're next door to each other. Those guys are neighbours, and B and C are a half step apart as well. Those notes are neighbours. And that's useful for memorising your fretboard. We can also think about how we might interpret this again. If I put this as whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You can see there are two different ways of stating the gaps between each of these notes. I can even do it with this UK version, so we get tone and semitone. Let's put that in. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. This is something that you need to memorize, whichever way works best for you. If you want to learn it as the numbers 1 1 half, 1 1 1 half, then that's up to you. Whole, whole half, whole, whole, whole half, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. It's completely up to you. The thing is, you need to memorize it. Once you've memorized it, you will be able to work out all your scales and the distances between the notes. The reason this is also called the major scale is because of this way that we can spell intervals, which are the gaps in between one note and another. If we look at the distance between a C and a D, we can see that is a whole step, which we would know as a major second. So the second that is here is major. This is why it's called the major scale. This is the root note of the scale. This is a major second. Now the thing is, because it's a major scale, the note that defines whether something is major or minor is the third. Because this is a major scale, guess what? This is a major third. So far, we've got a root, we've got a major second, we've got a major third. These fours and fives, you do not get major fourths, you do not get major fifths, you don't get minor fourths or minor fifths. These guys, because of the way that they work in the harmonic series, these are called perfects. This is called the perfect fourth. This is called the perfect fifth. We're still in a major scale. This is going to be a major sixth. And this note, yes, you've guessed it, it is a major seventh. And then you can see we get the octave, which is essentially the root note. And these are the ingredients that we get to make all our chords. Worth noting how these all work together. You've got a major second and a major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh. It can be really useful just to segment these things, break them down into chunks. That will help you massively. Let me just show you something else. This is great because this is in C major, but I did want to get into showing you how we got other keys that tie into this idea of the circle of fifths and the cycle of fourths. If we take C major here, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. This is the exact same information that we have here. And we just put these brackets on here. We get tone, tone, semitone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this works. I'm just going to block this off here. Now, if we put this into a group of 4, what happens is we get something called a tetrachord. Tetra, that means 4 notes in that group. If I carry this pattern of tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that tone there just to show you how to bridge across that tetrachord into the next tetrachord. You'll see that what happens is we get tone, 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 semitone. We get that again. The cool thing is if I start here now I have a tetrachord exactly like I have here for C major. Look at this. I get tone, tone, semitone. Look at what's happening in this next tetrachord. Tone, tone, semitone. Let me take this musical alphabet on another 4 notes. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I'm just going to block that off as another tetrachord. So the distance between a C and a D is a tone. The distance between a D and an E is a tone. That's wonderful. But remember, for it to be a major scale, we have to maintain this tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So we've got tone, tone, and this has to be a tone. But as we know, E and F are neighbours. Look here, E and F are actually a semitone apart. What I have to do is I have to take this half step and I have to make it into a full step or a tone. And by doing that, it means I go up 1 more fret, which means this F becomes F sharp. Because that's F sharp, that is going to be a half step away or a semitone away from the G, which means we have added this sharp to this key. And this is the new key. Think of each of these first notes in the tetrachord as the root note for the new key. This is the root note for C major, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. This is the root note, but by going up here, 5, which is why we get the circle of fifths, we can see we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. If I start from here, this is the root note for the G major scale. Root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then the root again. This note is called the leading note, and this leading note is always a semitone away from the root note. Now I could carry this on again. I could go D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. I've gone all the way up another tetrachord. I've got to go step, 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 half step. Let's just examine that. G to A is a tone or a step. A to B is a tone or a step. But B to C, if we remember, B to C is a half step. So what we have to do is we have to make the space between the B and the C comply to this idea of needing a whole step. And that would turn this C into a C sharp. This D note here is our root note now. We can see that the root is a D, the second is an E, the third becomes an F sharp. The leading note now switches to this over here. That was the leading note for the G major scale. So we've got root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, leading note, 7th to the D there, guys. If I take this business here, what we have in this part here, if I put that on the stave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All I need to do to show that this is G is take this F sharp here and show that on the stave, and that's where these notes come from. We take them from the tetrachord and we can apply them then to key signatures. If you want to learn how to read music, you need to learn your key signatures. If we do the same thing from here on the D, you can see what's happened is we end up having 2 sharps being introduced there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. Let's put that treble clef on there and you can see we get an F sharp and a C sharp. If you remember my mnemonic, for the flats it's battle ends and down goes Charles's father, but for sharps it goes father, Charles goes down and ends battle. So father, Charles. This is the mnemonic to help you to remember where they are. When we use this tetrachord system and we go up that way, we get the cycle of fifths. It's worth working it all out, getting some paper, plotting this all out in a really long stream so you can see what happens and where these accidentals come from. That's what these are, these sharps, and how they appear based on this tetrachord business. Here's the thing. If I wanted to go backwards this way, this would introduce something called the cycle of fourths. The cycle of fourths is something that guitarists need to understand because it is the way that the guitar is tuned. The cycle of fifths doesn't live on the fretboard. The cycle of fourths does. That lives on the fretboard. So the cycle of fourths is something that you need to know. Let's go backwards on this. And I'm going to use my musical alphabet backwards. I'm going to go F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F. That brings me into this lower tetrachord. This is why C major is right smack dab in the middle of it all, because it has 0 sharps or flats. As you can see, when we go above C major, we start adding sharps until we end up with 7 in the key signature. We do the same going backwards using flats. So let's put this major scale structure underneath. We'd always underpin it. You can see that we have our upper tetrachord for the key of F now. It's already plotted out out for us, but we need to modify this so that it tallies up with the tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone structure. F to G, G to A, and A to B. And then we need this whole step in there as well. F to G, we've got a whole step. G to A, we've got a whole step. A to B, we need it to be a half step. If we look up here in the C major example, you can see that the distance between A and B was actually a whole step. We need it to be a half step. But to get that, what we have to do is we have to reduce it by 1 fret. When we reduce that distance, we are flattening the interval. To make this happen, and for B to C to be a whole step, we end up putting a flat symbol on there. And this introduces the flat that we need for the key signature. Like I said before, if I put the key signature in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then what happens is that B flat then needs to go on here on our key signature that tells us every time we play a B, it's going to be known as a B flat. So we find that guy here, that tells us that is a B flat. That also makes me just remember there is another synonym that we can have for this, minor second. We might even get this called a flat second. This would also just be known as a second. Let me do another flat key for you. I'm going to go backwards from this here. I'm going to use this tetrachord here to go backwards. So we go B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B. You can see now we have a new key signature. This is going to be the root note for the key of B flat. If we remember that we need to go tone, tone, semitone, and then tone, 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 semitone. We've already modified this upper tetrachord, and that's the way to think of it, is that the major scale has a lower tetrachord and an upper tetrachord. Then what we need to do is modify these other notes. Now, here's the easy way to see it. We know that this last note here is the octave or the root note, and that has the flat on it. So let's just put it on there, and that's going to tell us that is our key. But also look at the distance between the B flat and the C. If we remember that B and C, they're a half step apart. We need it to be a whole step. To do that, we lower that 1 fret. The distance goes down 1. So there, B flat to C, that is a whole step. C to D is a step. D to E. Okay, if we look, D to E is a whole step. We need it to be a half step if we are hoping to retain this major scale formula. What we have to do is we have to flatten this E here. This introduces a modification of that musical alphabet, and it means that we end up with an E flat. That has modified the distance between the E flat and the F to become the whole step that we need to maintain the major scale structure and to maintain the tetrachord. A to B flat, that is a half step. If it was A to B, that would be a whole step, but in this instance, we don't get that whole step. We just need that half step. If I need the key signature now for B flat major, then all I need to do now is add B flat, battle ends, and there you go. That tells me my flats. This is how tetrachords tie into that major scale, how you understand the major scale, how you understand these synonyms. If you've enjoyed this theory lesson, then you might want to watch this video here. Whole